already have a very special person. Why is she special, Agne? She's special because, well, I've been here for 4 years as a host. She's been here for 4 years as a guest every single time. Every single time we miss her, every single time she says, yes, I will come again. And when I first met her, I'm talking like you're not here, so just... when I first met her, I somehow had some kind of, I don't know. I always remember you as Xena, the warrior princess. You do have some kind of resemblance, and then I'm that kind of host who, well, when you research your speaker before you present him or her, you usually go to Google, research stuff, so on and so on. And I usually go to Twitter, descriptions on various, well, social websites or something like that, just to find, you know, that fun stuff, not just official representation. And one thing that she always puts on her social media or whatsoever is that she is competitive equestrian. Mm-hmm. Is that the right pronunciation? And also is training in mounted archery. Mm-hmm. Tell me she's not Xena. So I present you Xena, also known as Heather Downing, and well, the stage is yours. She will be telling you how to take care, what food to give to, and also how to, well, I wanted to say breed, but I think it's not in your topic. It's a different channel. Yeah, how to take care and feed software engineers. Stage is yours.
Thank you. That was an excellent introduction. I will hire you for all future interactions. Welcome, and thank you for taking some time to figure out a little bit about how to not just become a great engineer, but how to retain some once you decide to become a leader. So when I first got asked about this topic, it had a lot to do with this mass exodus that companies are experiencing, especially right now. What they wanted to know, I pay a certain amount of money, and it seemed like my developers were fine, but they didn't want to stay around. What is that about? So, kind of rolled up my sleeves. After having had both excellent managers and terrible managers, I kind of wrote down things that I noticed was common in everybody's experience, whether you are here in Lithuania or farther away on the other part of the planet. And so I'm going to start this off just like a TED Talk and put out some fabulous words like kindness and empathy and connection. I bet you're falling asleep already. I know you would rather have me talk to you about cooler ways to do cryptography, and you and I should definitely talk later because I do a lot of that on the side. But we have to talk about this human skills gap that none of us are taught when we are promoted. That's a big deal. And sometimes it can hit you a little bit on the side of the head. So let's start off by talking about you. I can safely assume, because you came out to build stuff today, that you are competent and worthy of being here. Can we at least all agree we're going to start from that baseline? You have paid your dues and worked your way up with that skill set, okay? But do you actually remember how you felt when it all began? Do you recall who you were back then when you first started coding? I know when I was in the beginning, I had a lot of frustration with context. So when somebody would suggest that I write something of value to be part of the project and part of the team, I often was missing context. Sometimes when you're learning, you feel an immense pressure to perform and to prove your worth. And let's be honest, when you are a junior developer, there isn't a lot there for you to go against. You don't really know how much worth you are presenting at the time. I remember the hours I would spend trying to decipher what programming really even was, especially when I was learning it, and I began to wonder if I had enough space in my brain to figure it out. So I know it was probably a long time ago for some of you, but try to think back to what that felt like in the beginning. It was both exciting and very frustrating, right? Glad you're with me. But you figured it out, and that moment is the reason you became addicted to programming. That moment where it actually ran and it didn't crash, and it did what you wanted to do, and you felt like a god, right? In that moment. We've all had that moment. It may have been a long time ago for some of you, but that moment is the reason I'm still here today. I made something out of nothing. That is pretty cool. I felt like a wizard. And I still feel that way when I learn something new, even now. This feeling needs to be present and acknowledged by others, unfortunately, for us to satiate that tribal nature of humanity. We need to know that we belong. And so this feeling needs to come often enough to feel like we're part of that tribe of developers, right? So you're excited and you're doing this for a while. So now that you've done a couple of cool things that you've told everybody about, right? Then some recruiter or company decides, you've done a couple of things, let's put you in a team, of which you've not learned anything about teamwork, right? You probably went to school to learn about programming, or you went to a boot camp to learn about how to do web development, but they never talked to you about the team dynamic, did they? No. It's usually, and this is why I liked programming as an introvert, I liked just coding in a corner by myself and not having to talk to anybody. That was fun for me. But in order to have money and have our lives, we need to be usually in a programming team. So now, this is the long journeyman quest, right? Now this is the level you're at where you have to figure out how to fit in. And whether you acknowledge this or not, there's an undercurrent of social pressure that happens because you're human to try and perform and fit in. And I thought it was going to be amazing. Every other day, I'd be able to create something incredible. But usually, that's not how it was. We were just excited if a couple of our tests passed half the time, right? But you put in some time, and now you're a confident mid-level developer. Awesome. You know just enough to be dangerous, but not enough to be wise. This is what felt like the longest part of my programming career, staying in the mid-developer area. It's a very important job. It's often a very underpaid job, but it is the most fun because there's not too much expected of you, but you're still trusted just enough to be part of the team, right? It's a very comfortable place to be. Then you get, I don't know, maybe you transfer from one company to another, or you finally get a promotion, and you think about whether or not you should really become a senior. I have not met a lot of people who are senior developers that don't tell you that they are, kind of like they're vegan or they do CrossFit. Yes, I'm a senior developer, senior programmer, senior. Yes, because they're proud of it, and you should be proud of it. But it's very intimidating to everybody else who's not there yet, right? What's interesting is that people that think they aren't really senior, but are bestowed that title by their peers, by the company they work for, are often the ones who it's very deserving for. But the people that demand the role, there's nothing wrong with stating what you want, but the people that demand the respect without earning it often can come across really harsh. I love this quote by Bill Gates. Success is a lousy teacher. It seduces smart people into thinking that they can't lose. And I think this is where you get to be around a lot of smart people. And we get to build some pretty cool things and some pretty boring things. But either way, we're solving problems. The fact is, results are the only thing that matters in your career to a company. But in order for results to even happen, that requires specific behavior on your part. Okay? Humans are not robots, although sometimes I wonder, and we cannot be programmed as easily as one. humans have emotions, and we have to deal with that. And we have to figure out what dictates our moves within the team, above and below. So what we're going to do today is try to get a handle on how to recognize what motivates people on your team, but also what blocks their ability to perform. I was fascinated by this because of a talk I've given in the past about imposter syndrome. How is it that some of the most brilliant people out there will refuse to accept that they provide value and they are good at what they do? What is that about? Is it a false modesty? What is it? No, it usually is because they can see how much more they have to go, so it's hard to acknowledge how far they've come. So if the smartest people out there and the ones that are really providing so much value to the rest of the world are going through this, don't you think we should visit how to take care of the minds and the hearts of the developers in our group? I would say the answer is yes. And for those of you who are really not interested in the feelings of others, and that's okay, I've been there before, let me put it this way. It is very expensive for you to lose your crew. So maybe care about them as humans and they won't leave you. Just something to consider. So regardless of your motivation for being here, let's go through what it would take. You are now promoted. Congratulations to everybody in this room. You are now promoted to being the lead developer or the architect. Take your pick. But remember that people buy into a leader before they buy into the vision. Do they trust you as a human? This is even harder when you're new and you're coming in a leadership position to a company or a team that does not know you. It's a little frustrating. It can also be challenging if you were promoted from within because it was you and Roberto and Annie that were all up for this promotion and you got it. So now you have to deal with the disappointment of the ones that did not get this promotion, right? You may not talk about any of this audibly, but it's still there, whether you like it or not. It is, do we trust this new leader? What do you do? I can tell you this. Looking back on some of the leaders I've had, I feel really bad for them because it's not like they were promoted and then sent to training on how to be a manager. They were just like, hey, you're an excellent individual contributor. Now go run the lives of 16 people. That's a completely different job in a way. You know, congratulations, you're a good coder. Now you have to lead everyone else. But what I've learned is that leadership is a muscle, of which I have gone through most of my life not having any, but I'm working on it now. Let me tell you a little bit of a story that I think kind of applies here. So when I started to do weight training, because I really wanted to shed some weight, but I wanted to be stronger, I went to a good, well-renowned trainer. And we started with a very low repetitions, very low weight, just so that I could get the feel and deal with the soreness. Does anybody else here like work out at all and have, or at least have tried it once or twice? Anybody? No, just me. Interesting. In all of Lithuania, I'm the only one who has done this. But what I discovered is that after 2 months, I felt sore and tired all the time. And I felt really exhausted. And I told my trainer that I don't think I want to work out anymore because I don't seem to be stronger. I feel just tired and I feel like I'm not able to do the lifts and the reps necessary. So at that point, my trainer pulled me into a secondary room and said, okay, lift this. He had clearly moved some weights on it and I went ahead and lifted and it wasn't painful for me to do. And then he reminded me that this is the weight you started at. You have progressed 4 times what that weight is. I just never tell you the weight that's on there. And I thought, well, why wouldn't you tell me when I'm doing better? He says, that's not always how it works. Sometimes you work out because you want to get stronger for your sake, not because you want the recognition from the trainer. And I thought about that. Because it's a very selfless job to be a lead anything. Not everybody's going to say, you're the best manager I've ever had. Oh my gosh, you're such a smart leader. I love all your architecture. People don't necessarily do that, especially in programming, where we're really good at talking to computers and not each other. So it's difficult when you start to feel like you're even progressing with your team. But I promise, this is natural. You should be looking at the next thing you haven't solved for. But that means you're probably going to be sore a lot of the way. And sometimes it's okay to take a second and look back at how far you've come with the weight that is now on your shoulders as a leader. So one of the best experiences that I had interviewed somebody about was a leader that asked his team what they want from him. That's kind of interesting. Doesn't seem like it's very authoritarian, does it? Why would you ask your team what they want? Openly like that. It doesn't seem natural. But they gave answers, and I wrote them all down for you. Good leaders that make them feel safe. Now, they didn't say this word for word. They said it in multiple different ways in a survey. But the meaning was clear. When you feel safe to fail, safe to try something new, safe to ask for time if you are having something personally go on at home, then you're going to relax and do a lot better performance-wise at your job because you're not spending as much energy in a defensive place to protect yourself, right? The natural reaction is trust and cooperation when we don't fear our leaders. This way, you can actually combine your talents, and then instead of worrying about what's going on inside your team, you can unite to face the challenges outside the team that are coming at you, whether that is from other divisions in the company or that's from an end user, what have you. That way, the team can be united, and it's not about being afraid of who has what position inside. It's more about what you can accomplish against the outside. They also wanted a leader who has vision and higher purposes for their work. Believe in a mission for the team above and beyond whatever project you're doing. So this is a leader that can inspire others to the calling and their part in it. I had an excellent one of these where he definitely wasn't one of those inspirational speakers, but he, regardless of whatever project we were doing, our engineering team had a core mission of having the cleanest code possible. And everybody got behind that. And no matter what project we were on, that kind of all kept us together because then we could find new ways to do things like that. Even if our project ended and we had a new one, that still was kind of like the mission statement, right, of the group. If it's just, oh, I don't know, we just got to get this project done, it's hard to get behind that because what happens when the project's done? What is there left for your team, right? Especially if you do contracting or consulting work, the projects can change often. So it's important that you say, hey, when you work here, this is what I expect, and this is how we will support you towards this mission. Hopefully that makes sense. They also mentioned that they needed a flexible and empathic leader during their personal challenges. This was one of my favorite questions. If you have hard times in your family, would you consider firing your family member? I mean, no, maybe you would. I mean, some of us have challenging family members. But think twice about what is going on with your developers. And I often say don't sacrifice the people to save the numbers, but that's really hard if you as the engineering lead have no impact really on what the money situation is in a company. But what I really mean is that whenever possible, to really advocate for your teams, for their salaries. This is a big deal. Say, I'm going to go and fight for this for you. Whether it happens or not, they see that and they will notice that you're on their side. This is difficult if you don't really connect with every person that reports to you. That was difficult for me. What happens when you really do not like your direct report? That's hard, especially right now when it's difficult to find other developers that can perform at the levels that you need them to perform, that are willing to leave the company they're at to come, right? But if you don't have hard and fast rules about things and you put people before your profits, that's usually the time where you'll find the tenure increases. None of this should surprise any of you, and yet it happens less than 70% of the time in companies with engineering teams. Why is that? So the argument would be, company is not letting me do something. My hands are tied, can't do anything. Instead of focusing on what you can't do, what can you control? Because whatever you can do that will make your developers' lives better, even if it's small, they will see that, buy into your mission and your vision for what's happening, and they will most likely stay. Not always, but it's a pretty good start. So these are basics. Please listen. A leader doesn't need to have the first word, the last word, or even most of the words, contrary to popular belief. The state of team will often be made very clear when you listen and digest what's going on. You don't always have to dictate an action when there's a problem. Many times, I found that during a stand-up meeting, hopefully some of you have experienced agile processes before. During stand-up meetings, my manager would not let me speak first. He would always let the most junior person on up to the senior person talk in that order. And here's why. You'd be really surprised how many times there's a really good idea you didn't think of because you're used to the comfort zone of solutions in the back of your head, right? This is also a problem for me. I do .NET, so I think very .NET about everything. But sometimes that's not the answer. Sometimes it's an answer with Node. Sometimes it's an answer just with a different approach altogether. And if you never let the people who are newer talk first, they're always going to defer to the seniors. And they should in many regards, but you're going to miss the good ideas that come from talking to your juniors and mids and letting them come up with solutions first. This was kind of a fun exercise that we went through, and after a while, everybody kind of felt like their voice was heard, even if they didn't have somebody, they didn't have their particular idea adopted, they still felt like they got to talk about it. You will have differences, and that is okay. In fact, it's awesome. So start by respecting those differences instead of the temptation of telling them they are wrong. I have been particularly tested in this one. There is a reason why a developer thinks the way they think and do what they do. So if you start respecting their process and however they think about it first and coming at it from that angle, you will get a lot farther with meeting in the middle. There's often a complaint that leaders in an engineering role tend to hire just people who are just like them because they want to work with somebody who's easy to understand. But then they miss out on all of these other perspectives. So you got to get used to the fact that not every member of your team is going to just be vibing with you. Sometimes you've got to just respect where they come from and see how it can improve the greater situation for the team or the project. Not everyone is a natural born cheerleader, and you don't have to be. Remember, this is a muscle that you're building, and being a successful encourager anyway means believing in the ability that the developer can overcome whatever situation is being put in front of them, especially if they don't believe it themselves, then you have to. Would you like to do all their work? That's exhausting. A good leader at this point in time shouldn't be building all the things. Your team should be the ones building it. So try and encourage that. When I gave that particular set of feedback to my direct manager above me that he's not very encouraging, he said, well, I mean, I believe in the team, but like, I think it's really fake to go, yeah, you're awesome and great job. And it doesn't feel genuine to me, so I don't want to be fake. Right? Oh, okay. So then I guess say nothing to your team so they don't know if they're even doing a good job. That sounds like a better alternative. Right? No. I said, at some point, you got to build the muscle and do it in whatever way you can. When you become a leader, you have to learn how to speak other people's receptive languages. For example, some of us need actions. I'm very much that way, that I don't believe any words you're saying until you follow them up with action. Tell me, oh, you're great, you're going to get promoted someday, but you never promote me, then I'm not going to believe you, right? But others don't need any of that. They just want an occasional reminder that, hey, that PR that they pushed was good. They don't need to like be excited over the top, just like, hey, good job on that. I liked that. And that's all it takes for them to feel like what they have given is worth something. We spend a lot of time working on these projects. Well, at least I do. Hopefully, you all do it in a natural, less than 40 hours a week situation, right? But when we get excited about our technology, we tend to obsess, and we do a lot more than that. So especially if you're in that situation, it's important to learn how to encourage. Find the most natural way for you to do it, but recognize it's not about your comfort level at this part in the game. You wanted more money? You wanted more responsibility? You got it. Now learn how to be a good leader. That doesn't mean that you get to just ignore some basic needs that your team has just because it's not comfortable for you. Recognition is ranked higher in importance on the list than even compensation, although, let's be honest, compensation is kind of important. That's why we do this sometimes, because we need money, we have families, right? But employees in every field, regardless, tech included, they're often starved of recognition that they did a good job at anything. We spend, on average, just as much time with our coworkers as our family. So I'm not saying you have to treat them like family. I'm saying, please acknowledge that you're working tirelessly side by side, and a little bit of recognition goes a long way. When I say recognition, I don't mean encouragement. I mean, hey, everyone, this person did a great job at that. Even if they feel embarrassed about it at the moment, subconsciously, they're like, oh, I provide value. And they recognize me for that. It costs nothing to say, hey, at a company meeting or whatever, I'd love to recognize my individuals on my team. It costs nothing. There's no budget line for that. Recognition is very, very important in a team that is high functioning, like I'm sure all of you are on. A technical leader will also delegate. Ooh, this one's hard. Because remember, a lot of us got here because we were excellent individual contributors, and we felt very strong in our expertise. But you have to let go of that a little bit, and that is terrifying because you feel like the project's going to fall down if you don't have your fingers in every part of it. If you were to admit it, that's a thing. But delegation is key here to make your team actually step up to the plate and truly feel like you trust them to do the right thing, right? Every person will have a different level of confidence here, and they may need continuous reminders that they actually have permission to go with their gut and continue without your approval every second. Empower your people. It also will allow you to have a vacation. So just remember to listen, respect people, encourage them, recognize them, and of course, empower them. Now that we feel totally in this very touchy-feely place, we're going to go to this lovely building. Has anybody else been here besides me? Oh, okay, few. This is the Parthenon, built in 447 BC in Athens, Greece. I had the privilege of visiting this incredible place a few years ago. And when you look at it, even in its state of disrepair, it appears to have perfectly straight, identical columns that hold it up. It's pretty cool. I really like this drawing of it. But it's an optical illusion. In order for it to appear straight at a distance, each disc that we have up there stacks upon one another, and they taper ever so slightly towards the top and inward, getting smaller, making the order that each of those discs are stacked in pretty important to reach that appearance, right? Well, not only is each disc column smaller and tapering, they're also compensating for where they are placed on an irregular ground foundation. Because at least back then, we didn't have some of the heavy equipment that we have now. So the ground was imperfect. It wasn't completely level. Therefore, the architect required millimeters of difference to each one of those discs so that they could reach the roof at the same place. That makes it pretty crazy. That even though it looks like they're all the same columns, each one of those discs literally would be numbered like the second column on the left, fourth disc. Because it wouldn't be the same. You wouldn't be able to swap it out. And when you think about how this is built, that's how amazing development teams are built. You can't just swap out one mid-level developer for another mid-level developer and expect it to just fit perfectly in your team dynamic. There is unique attention required for that individual in order to give them a place that is right for all of their talents and to celebrate that. So that made it really complicated, didn't it? We had this cool building going on with our team, and then somebody quit, or somebody got fired, or just retired. And then we need somebody that is a column 2, fourth disc from the left fit to come in to keep our team going. Ugh, that's a little hard. So you might find one, probably not. They may know a little something about it, about the same kind of subject matters, but they're going to attack the problem differently than the last person did. So how do you take care of each different unique disc that you've got now in your team? That's where the care comes in. How do you take care of each person that has such unique place that they've slotted in? Let's start off with the roles. Everything you needed to know as a junior developer, you already know. At least you knew it when you were a kid. You have to show them how by demonstrating tasks and staying nearby to guide them when they begin, and let them make mistakes, remind them that it happens, and encourage them to get up and try something different or to do the same thing again, right? Show them how by demonstrating everything and then letting them grow from there. That brings us to the care of mid-level developers. You need to support coworker pairing because they now contribute more to projects with consistent results. You don't have to monitor so much, but this is the time where they need to learn that there's more than one way to do things, right? Generate confidence in your mid-level developers by encouraging them to vocalize their ideas. Remember how I mentioned that before? Ask them what they think first. Then you will start to see a whole lot of really cool stuff happening, especially when they start speaking up. Then you'll see the spark. This is my favorite part, is that regardless of their personality, you can tell when someone's really interested in a particular problem solved in a certain way in a project. You can see that spark. Give everyone a chance for that to happen. So let's say that you've generated that confidence and let them start talking, and they've really increased their skill set. Now they're seniors. This is hard. This is really difficult because now senior developers less and less feel like they need to be part of the company, and they become more their own identity, just like all of you here. Why are you at a conference talking about programming when you could just do your day job, that is also programming. Because you are formulating your own identity as a programmer separate from where you work. This is usually the stage that that happens. You need to allow time for your seniors to experiment. This is really, really important. Give them autonomous tasks and say, hey, it'd be great if we could solve this problem. And then have them bring it back to the team and talk to their team about how and why they came up with this, right? Make sure that as seniors, they are regularly teaching concepts to other developers and showcasing research of what they found. So that way, you're not spending all of your time as a leader individually every day coaching. This is something you can delegate to your seniors. So now that we've gone over kind of what the roles require for attention, what about personalities? This has always fascinated me. I am a fan of science, so naturally, when I couldn't figure out why some teams I loved being on, other ones I hated, it had everything to do with psychology. So I did a little bit of a research project, and I came up with some basics. So you definitely need to add human skills to something that you need to continuously improve upon learning as a leader. But I'll give you some free information to just get started. Start with the introvert. Believe it or not, I am an introvert. All that really means is that if you're introverted, you don't get your energy from talking to other people or being with other people. You get your energy from spending quality time alone and getting to think. This was me. Now imagine me as a programmer being introverted, being asked to pair program for 8 hours every day with someone else. That was a challenge for me, and it was hard because I'm somebody who needed to just go by myself and think about the problem and bang out some code. So what I needed is going to be different than someone's personality that is not an introvert, right? It didn't get my energy from people, right? So then where did I get that? I spent a lot of time being reflective and thinking about the problem. So I'm not somebody who, at the time, I've since grown a little bit, but at the time, you couldn't ask me rapid fire succession questions. I needed to know what the questions were going to be, and then I needed to go off by myself and think about them, formulate my thesis, and then I could come back and talk about it, okay? So often, when we have meetings called last minute, it panics me because I have no idea what I'm going to say. I have no idea how to contribute because I wasn't allowed to think. So those developers need to be given a heads up, and they need to also be given a break from humans. I can't tell you how good working remote was for me for the first few months. It allowed me to only come to meetings and come to PRs and projects once I felt ready to, instead of having the demand of constantly having to talk to people. It was great. And so respect people who are like that. So let's talk about extroverts. They're very valuable to your team as well. Somebody who gets their spirits raised by others can often bring a lot of value to the team in the form of just morale for the whole group. Because if everybody is really frustrated and quiet, they tend not to really celebrate so much, right? But extroverts are always the first ones to volunteer. And thank goodness, right? Introverts need extroverts because at least they're the ones raising their hand. Yeah? I think there's maybe 2 extroverts in this whole audience. Extroverts can be a lot, but the value they bring is pretty awesome. They're the first ones who will be willing to present outside of the team to the rest of the company. You can always can really count on them for that. And often they need team outings, team time that is not related to work, because that's how they bond with people. So these are the ones who probably have had the hardest time in the past few years of all of us. But let's say you've got that optimist on your team. Everybody loves an optimist, right? Because the world isn't falling. No, everything's good. Everything's going to be okay. You know why? Because we're all smart. We're going to figure this out. Optimists, even if you roll your eyes at them, they give that wonderful encouragement, and they're unshakable. It doesn't matter what happens. They always look for the good in this situation. And I would say developers have a lot on our shoulders. We are challenged often. So it's always nice when a member of the engineering team is optimistic about what's going to happen, right? So their value is pretty clear. But not everybody talks about how valuable it is to also have a pessimist on your team. They find all the blind spots in the situation that others don't notice. Yes, it can feel a little negative sometimes, but if you have a whole team full of just one or the other, it's really hard to be balanced. You need somebody who's pessimistic enough to say, hey, whoa, 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 before we just, decide to migrate completely over to that thing, has anybody taken a look at Stack Overflow problems on that? Has anybody looked at it? We need the pessimist. We need them to double check the direction that we're headed. And you need to consider how sensitive some of us can be. This is hard because I say sensitive and I might think of a different thing than you. It's not always apparent until they're usually the ones who will catch empathy for others. So they're probably going to be the ones that tap you on the shoulder and say, hey, I noticed that Lars is just kind of down, or I noticed that this person's really frustrated. Maybe they just need XYZ. And while they can be definitely more reactive to big changes, they often are kind of like the beating soul of the team because they pay so much attention to how each person feels, which is a good way to have a pulse on your team. If you don't spend a lot of time with them, because especially now that we're remote so much, they really know how people feel about being there. And they're the first ones who are going to kind of give you any red flags that are really happening with the team not being happy. But you also got to think about how to handle a bold person. They're the volunteers for sure. They want the chance to lead and take charge so badly. They will often talk over everybody else because they're very excited about their idea. I am both introverted and bold. It's kind of weird. I'm introverted until I have something to say, then I hope you're okay with me stepping on everything you're saying because I have to get this idea out, right? Bold people really blossom when you give them a chance to lead in a small way. It doesn't need to be a big way, but just enough to kind of like let them stretch their wings a bit and try something that they have to do for other people and not just be an awesome individual contributor, because this will be a challenge for them. You will often have somebody, usually there's at least one on every team, that is kind of really thoughtful. They think about things many years in the future for how, like, where is this software going? Where is this company going? These ones are really hard to live in the moment. They just think about the next 2 years from now. They don't think about current thing. But the value they provide is they often are the ones that will increase the quality of your code and focus on the true big picture instead of just what we have to ship right now. Give them room to contribute and ask them what they think about the situation. Whether you have more experience than them or not, you'll find that they're always thinking about like the next few things away. So now that we've gone through what I think are most of the personality types, I would be remiss if I didn't mention the downhearted. This is not a personality type. It could be any one of us. So whether it's a moment in life that happens to every person or someone suffers from a medical diagnosis, this is something that a leader is going to run into. My best advice here is this. You're not a psychologist. You're not here to do that for your team. But understand that when you're downhearted and disconnected, that may be something that they need time for. All you can do is be flexible and give them that time and allow it. Some of the most brilliant developers I know have just been going through a lot, especially right now when we are very disconnected. You have to treat your team as a whole. And I just told you a whole bunch of stuff, and I'm not even a clinical psychologist. We're just talking about some basics here. What I'm trying to get at is this. You can't treat your team the same way. Each person is at different disc, and you have to treat them in the manner that they need in order to blossom. So that means even if you don't like them, as you inherited the team and you didn't hire them in the first place, you still have to look at them individually with all of their pros and cons and see what would it take for this person to really blossom and to not just enjoy what they do, but also provide lots of value. What does it take for them? What do they need from me? That's like raising kids, kinda, but the difference is these are adults already, and you got to respect them instead. They're not going to just do what you tell them. That makes it even more challenging. The way to hack a human being is to notice and study their humanity, pay attention, listen, and then surprisingly, when you give somebody support that they need, you'll find that projects just start getting done on their own because you have fed and cared for your team properly. So allow developers to do their jobs, handle like non-development work needs so they don't have to think about this. That includes taking the meetings for them so that they can just keep coding. Be moderately responsive and reachable. Make regular one-on-ones a priority and emphasize quality code over quantity or velocity. And try not to throw too many random things at them because that's very frustrating to have to task manage. Stephen Hans is one of my good friends, and I loved this quote so much I needed to share it. Trust your team's judgment. You may need to step in, make decisions and priority calls, but this will be on the information that is provided by your team. If you get this right, then you should have a good, autonomous, and self-directed team. I think you'll probably agree with that sentiment at this point. So, since I'm running out of time, I just have a couple of things to task you with, if you're ready. Go forth and apply all the new tech that you learn at Build Stuff. Think about what you discovered here, talk about what you've learned in the hallways, and share better ways to code, because all of these skills are necessary. But take care to learn how to truly nurture your team by adding human skills to future plans as well. With a group of confident, cohesive, and supported developers, you really can build anything, even your own Parthenon. So be a gate opener and not a gatekeeper. And as always, stay curious. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I feel like I just had a personality test. And our online chat seems to feel very similar. We're discussing, I'm an extrovert, I'm a bold one, I'm a visionary, I'm a dad.
Yes.
So we're having fun. We have, so far, we have one question in the mid of your presentation online, but do we have any questions in the live audience? We have a hand. I will address the hand. Yes.
How do I know if I should stay for a leader or if it's time to move on?
Oh, that's a good one. How do I know? How do you know if you should give your leader a chance because they haven't really been educated themselves on how to be a manager, right? How do you give them a chance or say, you know what, I'm going to move? Is that your question? The way that I've determined it is that if you cannot have an honest one-on-one just once, where you say, I need this, can you give that to me? If they can't say yes or no, it's time to move on. If they give you a lot of workaround like, oh, I don't know, it's not in my control, or I don't know, that's not really how I work. The moment you get that resistance and they won't even listen or acknowledge what it is you're telling them, it is time to leave because they're probably not going to change that. That being said, if you're that leader, you can be humble. And when the person that you're trying to coach It's usually a coaching situation like, hey, you didn't really do enough PRs this week, or your code is not good and we got to fix it. Those are tough conversations. But if you don't really know how to deal with that, please say that literally word for word to them, saying, hey, I am learning this management stuff. And will you give me a second to really reflect on how I can handle the situation? Ask permission to your direct report to see if you can figure it out. Because what you're doing is you're giving them your goodwill, right? And if you have a manager that does not give you their goodwill, you don't need to stay.
I think this deserves a round of applause. She's so inspirational. I mean, what I heard is just communicate, basically. In a slightly complex way, but communicate. Anyway, we have a question from online, from Gediminas. What to do with a bad leader in charge, except from leaving the company?
Oh, so if let's say you love the company and you have a bad leader, have you tried talking to them? I know that sounds terrible. If you're really scared of them, and I don't use that word often, if you're really scared of your leader, consider going to their leader, if you're willing to do it on behalf of your team, saying, hey, we'd love to communicate or figure things out, but we're not getting what we need.
I just had this situation in my surroundings, and the result after somebody from the team went to the upper boss is our CEO got fired.
Oh.
Yeah. So
often companies would like to retain you. You're expensive to train a replacement for. So if your leader isn't taking care of you, they usually want to know that so that they don't lose a whole group of people by keeping one. Does that make sense? So usually, again, it doesn't always have to be about caring for the human. I would like it to be, but money talks to companies. So if the whole group is disgruntled, please go tell somebody who's the next level up about hey, we're trying, but we're not really getting what we need. They usually will do something about it.
Okay, any more questions from the audience? It's another hand. And I'm gonna address the hand.
Do you see any value in mentors or coaches that are distinct from line management? Because that often comes up as a potential angle to grow staff.
Yes, so part of the reason I feel that community outside of your company is so important is to find that coach for your career that doesn't have a conflict of interest. Your manager can't really coach you. They can sorta, but remember, their alignment is going to be often with the companies. So it is important, and I agree with you, to just have somebody listen, somebody you can talk to that understands your career and your industry in general, about just a sounding board. Should I do this? Should I do that? Sometimes it's not even about telling them what to do if you are in the coach position. It is just, hey, talk this out loud. This is what is standard. This is what the industry does in general. Because I had a coach, I discovered I was grossly underpaid. But I wouldn't have known that if I just talked to my manager at the time, right? It's important, I agree with you, to have people that you can look up to and talk to outside of your work.
Any more audience questions? Okay, because I have still a couple questions. Actually, one question and a follow-up to that.
Okay.
Am I right, is my question, that you did quite a show in a few years ago in our Build Stuff party, singing-wise?
Yes.
Such an introvert. So my follow-up question is, our producer decided that this would be a great opportunity for you to remind us of your vocal skills with our anthem of this year, which is, it can go on. It's a great background. So, yeah?
I like karaoke, and sometimes, I meet other developers that like to also do music, and sometimes they let me sing with them.
Such an introvert.
I mean...
Okay, what's your favorite song?
My favorite song of all time, or that we do in the band?
No, it's for karaoke.
For karaoke, Probably Rolling in the Deep by Adele, because who doesn't love Adele?
Do we have a
please, no.
YouTube Rolling in the Deep right now?
No,
not really.
But
okay.
instead, tomorrow night, we're going to, at the party, the Line Breakers are going to perform for you from 9 o'clock, and we will do parodies of a bunch of old music that is all about programming.
Yep, we actually are going to have that party tomorrow, so I can't imagine how all of them will come on Friday. I mean, it's going to be hell. Well, we don't really have time for a karaoke song. I really would like to hear you sing, but, you know, let's leave that for tomorrow. Anything you want to say for Heather before she leaves? I guess that's a laugh. No. So, okay, that's all then.
Thank you all for having this American girl here and putting up with her.
Thank you very much.